Hi guys, I wanted to talk about the topic of not believing everything happens for a reason. Obviously, when I was a Christian, I believed God had a plan for us. I believed that basically everything happened for a reason, even terrible suffering or terrible disasters, whatever it might have been. I also believed that God gave us inherent meaning to ourselves and our lives. Now that I'm not a Christian anymore, I don't believe that. I don't really think anything has a reason for what happens. Of course, there's things like cause and effect, but I'm talking about some kind of bigger plan that some kind of entity has mapped out for us, and everything has these inherent meanings, and there's necessary suffering and stuff like that. I think what we see is what we get. And I think that's fair because there isn't proof for anything else. So I do not see the point in assuming there's like some kind of bigger plan at work here. I just I think that's wishful thinking. And when I say this, a lot of people turn their noses up and they're basically like, wow, that's really depressing. Or they genuinely ask, how can you live that way and still continue in life and feel good about it? And I understand why they have that reaction. It feels good, right? It feels good to believe that someone or something has it all figured out for us. It feels good to believe that there's a plan in a world that feels like constant chaos, because let's be honest, it is constant chaos. I think, in my opinion, there is a huge that's a huge reason religion and higher powers are even something we came up with in the first place as human beings. It gives us comfort in chaos. It can make us feel at peace when peace is hard to find. It can help us feel like we understand the world better. And although all of that stuff may bring positive emotions like comfort, peace, hope, that doesn't make it true. But it could make it a coping mechanism. Now, I I'm never one to speak in absolutes. So I think there's probably so many different reasons religion exists, why humans like gravitate towards religion, why they created religion, why they created gods and ideas about the afterlife. But it does feel to me personally like coping with death, dying, the afterlife, wanting to know more about the planet around you. It does seem to me like it is an answer to that, to be able to cope with all of those things. Now, like I said, I don't know for a fact if God exists or not. I don't know if I can't prove if there's a higher being or not. But if there isn't a higher being, if there isn't a God, and right now there isn't proof for any of that, it looks like a coping mechanism, right? A way to cope with life itself and every comfortable or terrible experience that comes with. I see people cling on to this when there's a death of a loved one, someone really close to them, when they are facing death themselves, whether they are dying or, just growing older. I see people cling on to this when there are major disasters. This can be any kind of disaster, like a personal disaster, a natural disaster, whatever. I see people cling on to this when the world feels like an awful, stressful place that they can't seem to understand. I don't fault people for that. I understand it. It's honestly one of the most understandable things in the world to me, honestly. I've watched people I know personally do this, and never once have I wanted to stop them from doing this and be like, hey, do you know there's actually no proof for this? Because that isn't helping anybody. What exactly is that contributing? I don't think it's contributing anything. But what I will say is, when I have conversations with religious people on this specific topic, I'm going to explain to them why this doesn't make sense to me, and I'm going to try my best to be honest about it without seeming like I'm trying to insult them, because that's never my purpose in even talking about this stuff. But if I'm being honest about it, from the outside, it seems like a coping mechanism. Like I said, life is hard. Most people know that. Most people experience that. But is that enough to think something is true? I don't personally think so. This isn't typically how I consciously accept something as true. My first thought isn't, does it make me feel good when deciding if I think something is true? Now, can that happen to me subconsciously? I'm sure. I feel like humans probably aren't immune to that, right? But if I am conscious of it, that can't be good enough for me, right? Of like, this thing makes me feel good versus, is this thing actually true, or do I just want it to be true? An example of this that I feel like I can relate to, not to like put myself on blast, but an example. I'm dating someone. They're a comfort to me. I've grown close to their family. And it's a really, really nice comfort to have people in your life through hardships. And it's nice to have that versus being alone because of, lack of parents in my own life, whatever. But one day I see on their social media accounts that they are cheating on me. It's soul crushing, right? It's terrible. A lot of us have been through it. All of a sudden, all those comfort you once had are ripped out from under you. And you want to believe this person wouldn't do this. You want to believe you can still have all of those comforts and things can continue to be the way they are because they make you feel good. But that doesn't matter when you know it's not the truth. No matter how badly you want that comfort, to accept it as truth would be a lie. Accepting truth can be painful and hard to accept, but for many situations, you do not reject the truth just because your comfort is disrupted or things that make you feel good are taken away due to that thing happening and you realizing the truth about something. And I feel like I could share countless examples of this in life. This was just one that was like maybe a little less serious and like maybe something a lot of people experience. But during my deconstruction was no different. It was extremely uncomfortable. It didn't make me feel too good when I came to the acceptance that there is no proof of a God or higher being. Therefore, why would I continue to believe a higher being or God exists when there are many other things I dismiss because there's no proof for that thing? And that includes other religious beliefs besides Christianity. So that didn't make a lot of sense to me, why I would reject other things without proof and then accept things like Christianity with no proof. I remember specifically watching a show called Pantheon. It's an animated show that came out in 2022. In the first episode, the main character, Maddie, is talking to her father about conspiracy theories, and she basically asks her father, why do people believe in these wacky conspiracy theories? And her father explains that people believe in conspiracy theories because the idea of a secret group orchestrating the world is far more comforting than the terrifying truth that it is entirely chaotic and nobody is actually in control. And when I was watching that scene, I was like, wow. Obviously, I have said in the past that conspiracy theories had a big impact on my deconstruction, but that very much clicked with me when it came to religion as well. But yeah, this scene just made me realize how often human beings crave comfort and control, and this can look like many different things. And the parallels between wanting to believe conspiracy theories and wanting to believe that a higher power has some grand big plan for us and is working behind the scenes, that came together for me pretty quickly and it all made sense. Both can be believed with no proof. Both can provide some sense of control and comfort in a chaotic world that is hard to understand and cannot ever fully be understood, probably considering our human brains. An example of this for me was the wildfires in Maui, Hawaii in 2023. It was obviously a very devastating thing to witness. As most natural disasters are, the people around me started talking about how this actually wasn't a devastating natural disaster, but instead it was actually somebody doing this. So like laser beams that were shot to start the fire. No, I'm not joking. If you're not familiar with this conspiracy theory, I encourage you to look it up. It's insane. But who is shooting these laser beams, you might ask? Depends on which conspiracy theorist you ask. Some will say Jewish people. Big shocker. There's a ton of like serious anti-Semitism within conspiracy theories typically, where it's like, you know, Jewish people run the world and they're all evil and out to get us and whatnot. Or some people might say it's the deep state, aka liberals or anyone they consider to be progressive, or even like Oprah Winfrey. I'm not joking. You get a laser beam, you get a laser beam, you get a laser beam. Anyways, the point is, it became very clear to me that creating an answer with no proof to back it up seems to be preferable to some people versus not knowing all of the answers or being able to admit that. Also, the real answer is a lot less exciting, and it's just like, okay, what if this was a combination of climate change, the non-native plants in the area, and the actual response to the fire itself? I started seeing this trend with this way of thinking. Suddenly, there were no more natural disasters. I don't know. I don't know where they all went, but now every time there's a natural disaster, especially in red states in the United States, it was the evil Democrats with their weather machine. Now, is there any proof of this? No. But you see where I'm going with this. It's this repeated behavior. And I am sure you have heard the quote, everything is a conspiracy theory when you don't know how anything works. I think this can be applied to many different areas in life because, let's be honest, there is so much about life we do not know or we don't know yet. And the uncomfortability of the unknown can feel a bit overwhelming to some people. I mean, I don't think I'm immune to that feeling. There are definitely things that I struggle to understand it. It makes me uncomfortable. A great example of that is the state of this country for the past year. It can cause me to spiral. It can cause me to go to a dark place. I have a hard time understanding how we got here. I have a hard time understanding the people who brought us here and are supporting it. That is hard for me to cope with, if I'm being honest. And there's things in life like that that are going to be hard to understand if you can't relate or get in that headspace. Another example for me is the process of dying. Obviously, I've never done it before. I have never done it, so there are many uncomfortable feelings surrounding that topic for me, and I'm sure a lot of others can relate to that. Now that I no longer believe in God, I do not believe there's any kind of afterlife or inherent meaning to life, so I typically consider myself a nihilist. So typically, nihilism is described as a person who believes that life is meaningless and rejects all religious and moral principles. This definition is from Oxford Languages. Now, although I do not believe there's any inherent meaning to life, I believe that we can create our own meaning in life. We get to decide what's important to us and what gives us purpose and drive. To many religious people I have seen, they do not find this to be sufficient. They find it to be lacking. It seems to make them uncomfortable overall. Many people want their meaning to come from some kind of objective source. And many Christians are taught that it wouldn't be good enough for you to create your own meaning and purpose. Like, that is such a foreign concept to them. So when they hear that, they're like, what? How can you possibly be okay with that? Because you're indoctrinated to believe the only reason purpose or meaning would matter is if it came from some outside objective force. How I was taught is that we are nothing without God. Obviously, the only reason we are worth anything is because God says so, or because God loves us. And it was heavily ingrained in me that you cannot trust yourself or your sinful, selfish desires. So imagine how it must sound when someone who is taught something like that is told, well, I get to define my own purpose and meaning. Obviously, that's going to sound like, oh, they're just giving in to their sinful, selfish desires because they don't want to follow God's rules, right? That's a lot of the reactions I get from Christians when having this conversation. Many people within religion have been taught that if it is not objective, then it is nothing at all, due to the nature of thinking in black and white, right? That adds up to me. Many Christians have asked me in the past, what's your meaning then? And if I'm being so honest and transparent, my answers change all the time. And since I don't believe there's inherent meaning, I think that's okay. Some days the answer is very simple of I'm here, so I might as well make the most of it. And that can look like enjoying the moment I'm living in, or that can look like helping other people, or that can look like pouring into my relationships, etc. There's so many different things. Now again, obviously many people find this to be insufficient. They have been taught that a certain requirement must be met for something to be meaningful at all. And I've noticed that with Christians, they talk about this in such an objective way, like their opinion that you need a God or outside source to have a meaningful life. They say that as if it's fact and not an opinion, but that is indeed an opinion. I also think another component to this is that a lot of Christians are taught if something is temporary, then it's meaningless. Like if something isn't eternal, then what's the point? Because I have a lot of Christians say that to me as well, where they're essentially like, well, all this is going to end, so why bother? And again, they say that like it's fact, like nothing could ever matter if at some point it ends. But who says that's the case? Who made that up? Like, that's just their opinion, is that because something ends, it doesn't mean anything at all. Like, when we're alive, we can decide something means something, and whether that ends or not, when we were alive, we made it mean something. And so there's that disconnect because they're taught this as fact in Christianity because of how much emphasis is put on eternal life. Like, that's the entire thing, right? The point is eternal life. So the thought of being content with creating meaning, knowing that at some point it will end, is going to be a very foreign concept. It's not because it doesn't make sense, though. There is no rule that says because something ends, it cannot be meaningful. That is simply a rule that religion made up for others. It's an opinion, like I said. I find that it reminds me like how precious our lives really are, and because they do come to an end. I do believe they come to an end. I think that it stops. I don't believe in an afterlife. Again, am I saying there couldn't possibly be an afterlife? No, I'm not saying that. There could, but I don't believe there's no reason for me to believe that there's anything after we die. As as far as this day, to this day. Who knows? Maybe that could change one day. But it makes me want to cherish so many moments I have, and it makes me want to cherish so many people because time is limited. And in fact, there are so many things in life that we heavily put value on because it's limited. Maybe it's your annual vacation, maybe it's going to a concert of your favorite musician, maybe it's seasonal traditions, even material objects like something handmade or one of a kind or a limited series on something. That becomes very valuable to people because there's limited quantities. So it makes sense to me when people assign value to things that are limited, we only get to do this once. And if you do not believe you get to exist forever, wouldn't it make sense that some people find it meaningful to make the most out of living existence while you still have it? I don't know, makes sense to me. But all that to say, you don't have to make it some huge meaningful life if you don't want to. I'm actually not in the camp of like, you have to make sure your life is meaningful. There's actually no higher being that says that you have to. I think that you should, I think it's probably beneficial usually to the person to make the most out of what you have now, right? But I'll be honest, some days just existing is good enough for me. There are days where maybe I'm really struggling mentally or whatever, emotionally, and or even physically, and just surviving that day, just existing in that day is good enough. In that moment, there's no higher purpose. I'm existing. And I honestly think that's okay. I find that reaction I get often when talking about this topic is, well, isn't that depressing? And my question is to them, even if it was, does that make religion true? Or does that mean that it just makes you feel better? But back to the question, isn't it depressing? Well, if I'm answering honestly, then the answer is sometimes. I always have struggled with depression, so yeah, sometimes life is depressing in general. I also used to find it pretty depressing that billions of people are just burning in hell for all of eternity. I would say that's more depressing to me than believing you just stop existing. But again, I don't think my emotions related to this topic say anything about its validity. The idea that life is what you decide it can be really scary if your entire life is taught you're taught to trust this objective source and to not trust yourself. It's not very easy to switch to, oh, now I get to decide what gives my life meaning after all this time being told to not trust my evil, sinful ways and not trust myself. Freedom can feel amazing. It can also feel really scary depending on the belief system you're coming from. I know when I finally became an atheist, all these freedoms I suddenly had were great and also equally terrifying in that moment. Some Christians have argued that I'm only atheist or a nihilist because I don't want to take responsibility for my actions and I want to live in sin, which I definitely still have to take responsibility to maintain relationships and to continue to live in our society by abiding things like laws and such. I just no longer believe I can do something messed up and then ask God, yeah, hey, can you forgive me for that? Thanks. Then I'm good, because that's the opinion that matters, right? That doesn't really feel like accountability to me. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people who they'll do something messed up to somebody else, but they'll be like, but it's great because God forgave me for this. And it's like, so all you had to do was either go to like a confessional or say a prayer. That to me doesn't seem like taking accountability. Call me crazy. That doesn't match my description of what accountability is, but I mean, to each their own. And as far as living in sin, I'm not really sure what people think my life looks like, if I'm being honest. First of all, I don't believe in sin because I don't believe in God. So how could I possibly believe in sin? Because sin is directly related to missing the mark with God. I don't believe God is real, so I don't sin. But I'm just not sure what people think my life looks like. I'm married. I'm a homebody. 90% of the time I'm staying home and doing crafts like crocheting and whatever else I feel like doing at the time. I hang out with my friends. So I don't know what this big living in sin thing is that I couldn't do when I was a Christian. And of course they can't explain it to me because they don't know me. It's just like a go-to thing, a basic stereotype of atheists are being rebellious and sinful. So, we just know that without knowing you or your life. It's a good go-to for them, I guess. That makes them feel better about the entire conversation, but it's just, to me, basically an ad hominem of, you're a bad person and you just want to be a bad person. To me, it's just not a serious argument at all. So just to wrap it up, I do not think everything happens for a reason. I do not think there's inherent meaning to me or my life. And how I feel about that, to be honest, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how I feel about it. I've yet to find proof that God exists, some kind of bigger plan exists. Therefore, I just don't assume these things are happening. On top of all that, I no longer feel like I need that certainty to make my way through life. I no longer need an answer to everything. Admitting I do not know is a freeing feeling because that's the truth. There's a lot of things I don't know. I'm not a know-it-all, actually. There's a lot of things I don't know, including if God exists. I don't know a lot of answers to life, and I don't even know if some of the things I want answers to even have answers in the first place. But I will probably also make a video on suffering specifically and necessary suffering and how Christians view that, because it obviously directly ties into everything happening for a reason and God's plan and whatever else. And I think there's so much to say in relation to suffering and the damage it creates when you romanticize this idea of suffering and how it like needs to happen, how this necessary suffering needs to happen for God's plan to come to fruition or whatever it might be. So I definitely think I'm going to do a video on that. Maybe it'll be next, maybe it'll be a couple weeks from now, but I have a lot to say on that. But I hope you all are doing okay. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.